Hello Crafty Crandall fam! Today I am bringing you something a little bit different in that I am going to go through my entire painting process from start to finish, from finding a reference to those final finishing touches and everything in between. So this is going to be a bit of a longer video, but hopefully it is useful to you and you can see my process and hopefully glean some new information from it. As you can see here, I have my reference photo picked out already. This is a reference from Mark Horan Photos. He is an amazing concert photographer, and he took this picture at a Tremonti concert recently in Orlando, Florida. Unfortunately, this was like 3 days after I left Florida, so I didn't get to see the concert, but I am a huge Mark Tremonti fan and have always wanted to do a full-scale painting of him, so that is what we are going to try to do today. The next thing that I did is I measured this out. So I took my handy dandy ruler, I measured my reference, which ended up being 6 1/4 inches wide by 6 3/4 inches long, and then I took my paper and I measured that out, just varying it slightly. So basically my finished piece will be 3 inches larger both width and height wise. So just made that photo 3 inches in both directions larger. The tools that I use for this process include a Graphic H pencil. I love these pencils. I always use them. They're my favorite. I also have a pencil sharpener, a kneaded and a regular eraser for all of my inevitable mistakes, 2 smaller erasers. These are the Tombow Mono Zero erasers. I really love these things. And then I also have my aforementioned ruler to measure out my proportions. So those are all of my essentials for sketching. I use these pretty much every single time I start a sketch in some variation or another, especially on a bigger piece like this. I like to have a variety of erasers ready to go for, again, my inevitable mistakes, because I am not the best at coming up with the greatest proportions right off the bat, but I do my best to correct them as I go. At this point, I will start taking measurements. So for instance, some key measurements that I'm going to want to take are going to be the distance to the top of his head, the distance from the back of his head to either this side or that side, his chin, and then probably his shoulder down. So those are the measurements I'm going to take. I've already done some initial, proportions and everything. So any measurement that I take, because my canvas is larger than the original photograph, it's going to have to be 1.48 times larger in width. So any width measurements I take, I multiply by 1.48, and any height measurements that I take will be 1.4 times. So that's basically how I work out my proportions. If there's an easier way to do it, let me know, but this is just how I prefer to do it. And let me just start marking out my paper. I'm going to mark it out with all the measurements that I take, and then I can start sketching the rest of the features. In watching this back, after filming it, I realized that there was, in fact, an easier way to do it, and that would have been to scale the image more proportionally than I did in the beginning. That said, this methodology still worked, and I don't think that I took, too many measurements, but at least managed to get the proportions mostly correct in the end. At this point, I've measured out all of my critical measurements here, so I've got all of his head diameter and stuff measured out. I've got his shoulder point here. I have the cross of the guitar with the mic stand. I've got the vertical component of the mic stand, and then I've got a point for the end of the guitar. So I'm gonna just start roughing out the rough shapes. Everything will change, of course, as I go along. There will be a lot of erasing, but all in all, it should work out okay. The sketching phase for me is always the most difficult part because I feel like I can spend forever doing this. I never feel like I'm done, and at a point I just end up having to call it and start the painting because otherwise I will be at this part forever. Here is a great example of messing something up. So I had the mic stand at about this angle, which was completely wrong. And I realized why. Because when I took the measurement for the end of the mic stand, I just took the measurement. I didn't multiply. So it actually needs to be at an angle more like this, and that should help with the proportions of the hand and also the portion of the mic stand that falls right above the top of the guitar. So that you can see what I'm saying, this part right here of the image was just looking really wonky, and that's why.
After fixing this portion of the image, I do feel like it got easier to work out the proportions of the hand and also the structure of the guitar, though in looking at the reference, you can definitely still see some differences. And then the arm. The arm was the worst part of the proportions for me. I struggled so much to get the arm angle correct. And then also, you'll notice at the end, the distance between his neck and his shoulder doesn't exactly line up with the reference photo either. So that, I would say, is my number one most difficult part of this illustration, was definitely his right arm, the one that is strumming the guitar. Other than that, you know, no, it's not perfect, but I don't strive to be perfect. I merely strive to make improvements in my art, and that is the whole purpose of this.
All right, I have made it to this point. I am going to stop now and have some dinner, take my eyes off of it so that when I return, I can kind of sort out some of the things that are wrong with it. So immediately off the top of my head, his face doesn't look exactly the way that I want it to. Based on the reference, you can kind of see there the differences, and I still need to finish the headstock on the guitar because I had that wrong, and I've just made some minor tweaks. So I like shifted the strap down because I had that wrong. I moved the arm a lot. I realized that I had some things just off about the whole thing, so I have kind of fixed it off camera, trying to just get it back in line with the reference. And like I said, I'm going to take some time away from it, come back to it, and then I will work on it, which for you will seem like a second, but for me will actually be a duration of time. Alright, I'm back. It's been an hour, and I'm just going to try to fix this. I think I realized that one of my problems is that this lip should go in a little bit more. I'm going to try to add the detail on the shirt, and then I'm going to again try to add the detail on the headstock. So let's go.
Doing the details on the shirt was definitely my favorite part. I challenged myself to make it as accurate as possible and really had fun with getting those details down. Sometimes the details can be the most fun part, and sometimes they can be the bane of your existence, but in this case, I really had a lot of fun adding them in the sketching phase of this process. The painting phase, getting them right, takes a little bit of patience, but overall, it is what makes the image come to life. Alright, now it's time for what I consider to be the scary part, and that is adding the strings to the guitar. I seem to always get these wrong, and they're really hard to erase after you put them down because you don't want to mess up all the rest of the details that you have. Also, his arm is still disproportional. Honestly, at this point though, like, I can't really fix it. So if you look at the line from his shoulder, in the reference it's longer, but measuring, like, it measures out proportional. It's just something else is relative to it is throwing it off. So it's really frustrating, but I kind of get to this point where I've got the basic shape down and it looks okay, and then I just kind of have to move on because otherwise I'll just spend forever in this phase, and I would like to get to painting this at some point. And now I am all set to put the masking fluid on. I've got my masking fluid out. I have my reference in front of me. Got a drink to enjoy. Soda, by the way. And then I've got my paint set up here, so as soon as I'm done masking, I can wait for it to dry and then start painting. I'm going to start with the background and then try to do the figure afterwards, because in my experience, it is easier to paint the background and then the person, because if you try to paint the person first, you get it perfect, you love it, then you go to the background, you run the risk of ruining something that you really liked. So, gonna try that. Masking out the whites can be a really great way in painting to retain them, as sometimes it can be difficult to control the paint to maintain the white. In this case, I actually regret not going through and maintaining the white of the background because, as you will see in a bit, I struggled with that part. Overall, I think that the masking process went pretty well. I used the Grumbacher Miskit Friskit masking fluid and have for quite a long time and really enjoy this masking fluid. I do recommend getting a small brush to apply it with, as applying it with anything else can be a little bit tricky, as it does stick and clump a little bit.
You will notice a problem that I'm having here with my brush. As I continue to apply masking fluid, it gets thicker and thicker and thicker because the brush accumulates masking fluid and then it dries on the brush. And so a tip that I have to fix this is to clean your brush halfway through masking if you need to do smaller areas. So right now I've got to do the guitar strings, and so I'm gonna have to clean this before I do that. Time to get to painting. Again, I'm going to start with the background and see where to go from there. So just gonna do the flat browns first, and then probably will take away some of the color from this region where the light is streaming in, and then there's a darker region down here, but I'm gonna do the whole thing in the same flat brown first.
To begin the background of this painting, I first mixed together a very large quantity of my base color. This was important because I wanted to maintain continuity and get a pretty flat wash, so I needed to mix the color in advance so that I wasn't trying to mix it all as I went. Then you saw that I had to take some color away because I forgot that I needed to maintain the white in that area for the light streaming through from the overhead lights above him. So that was a mistake, and then lo and behold, I repeated it with the next section of paint. So let this be a warning to you. Mask out your whites in advance, including the background if you need to. Other than that, I thought that I did a decent job of the application of the color. For the most part, it did maintain a pretty flat wash, and I was able to kind of add in the more wet on wet technique to get some of the more smoky effect in the background, and then tried to use a paper towel to continue to add texture to the background while kind of building up the color layer after layer. I tried to use this technique quite a bit, and to be honest, in this case, it just seemed like the most applicable because of the way that the light was streaming through the piece and just the various effects that I needed to achieve. I'm sure that there are many different ways that you could do this, but this was the direction that I kind of chose. I then went back in with a darker black color and just tried to maintain some of my darks, and honestly could have pushed the darks a lot further if I had chosen to. I regretted not doing that by the end, but after I had finished the painting, it was a little bit too late.
All right, and here you have my day one progress. So I'm gonna call it for tonight. It's Sunday, I've got work in the morning, and I really wanna do my nails because they're chipping. So I'm gonna do my nails, so next time you see me, I will have different nails, and I will finish up this painting in a different sitting.
I let the background dry completely, and then I moved on to the skin tones. The skin tones were the most worrisome part of this because of the lighting again. A lot of the colors were very desaturated or cool toned, and yet I still struggled to bring in enough warmth because by the time I finished looking at it, I realized that I really did need to maintain some of the warmth in his face, despite the fact that the reference appeared very cool toned. This is a common problem with me in painting in that I am still not the best at color mixing. I am constantly learning, and I highly recommend that if you are interested in painting or just improving your works, that you pay more attention to this as well, because it is such a common problem and one that really just takes practice and familiarity with your supplies to get right. I used my Sennelier paints for this, and they are my most familiar watercolors, and I don't think that I would have been nearly successful with this painting as I was if I had used a different type of paint. So I'm glad that I approached it with these, but it definitely taught me a lesson that I still have so much to learn as far as color mixing, color theory, and just really applying the right colors. In this case, matching colors to a reference, which just really requires all of that knowledge and then, the ability and the execution to do so. I continued to build up the shadows in various layers across the painting. I did so definitely on the skin as I went. I would let the layers dry, and then I would reapply paint in those layers after they had dried, trying to work on various pieces of the painting at once. So I would try to work on the parts that were not touching each other so that I could continue to apply wet paint where needed and let the other areas dry. At a couple of sections, I did use a hair dryer to kind of speed up the drying process, but for the most part, I did let it air dry with the exception of like 1 or 2 places. I really enjoyed the process of painting the skin in this piece. I think that his hand especially was a lot of fun to try to get the shadows in the little nooks and crannies. And then I really liked the gradient on his pant leg. I think that I did the gradient of the lighting in the pant leg pretty well and was very excited about it. Overall, I think that there were several other areas of the painting that came out decently well, but by far my favorite to paint and the most fun part of this piece was his shirt. Again, I had a lot of fun sketching it, I had a lot of fun painting it, and although I don't think that I matched the colors perfectly, again to the reference, I do think that it was just a joy to paint. My recommendation for getting into these small detailed areas like I had to in many cases here is to use a small brush and use one that is a round shaped brush, but that comes to a very fine point. Here you see me using my size 2 silver black velvet brush. This is my favorite brush for detail work. Despite the fact that I have many smaller options, this one honestly works well because it comes to such a fine tip that I can trust where it's going to go, and it works really well. I recommend you find a brush that you trust and use frequently so that you just know where all of your brush strokes are going, as this really made this process a lot more seamless with less hassle and less adjustment that needed to be made after the fact. Personally, I know when I am doing paintings like this, I always have a rag or a paper towel or whatever you're going to use to fix your mistakes alongside me, because it's a pain in the butt to have to get up off your seat, go get something, and by that point you might be too late in the case of watercolor to fix it, because the more that color like kind of dyes your paper, the less reversible a mistake might be. So I had that happen. That was exactly what happened in the background of this piece. I should never have used the brown paint over that area. This painting taught me so much as far as just my process, my ability to paint very detailed things and very realistic references. And although I've got a long ways to go, I do think that I was successful in learning some new concepts and really testing my skills, both as far as color mixing, but also brush control and water control and planning out a piece. To be honest, in going through the process with you guys, I think that I learned a lot on how to plan out a piece like this, how to execute on it. And yeah, there were things that I would change about it. The face, for instance, I, again, could have used a warmer wash. I did go back with a warmer wash kind of underneath his nose and to his chin, but never went back over through the forehead. So I think that those areas just could have stood to get a little bit more attention. And other than that, though, I again just learned so much through this process, and I really hope that you seeing this process and hearing me dictate what went well, what did not, that you can kind of apply these tips and tricks and techniques to your paintings in the future and just learn something. I mean, this video is meant to be both entertaining and hopefully somewhat informative. I know that painting is a journey. It is something that is just going to be built up over time and is a skill that I will probably always try to improve on. You see here that I ended up having to go back through and apply gouache to the background to bring out the whites again. Overall, this didn't achieve exactly my desired results, but did at least add some more contrast to the piece overall. Obligatory paint tape removal for the crisp edges of the painting here for you. And then finally, my little bone folder I used to take the painting off of the block, which I saw someone else do and thought that it was really aesthetically pleasing. So I left this footage in here for you to enjoy. But with that, you guys, this painting is coming to an end. I would really appreciate your thoughts and opinions on this video as a whole. Did you learn something? Did you not? Did you enjoy watching me paint this piece? Do you like Tremonti? I didn't even really talk about Tremonti. This is Mark Tremonti from the band Tremonti and Alter Bridge and Creed. He is a super talented musician, and if you have not heard his album Marching in Time or any of his other albums, I do highly recommend that you check him out. Additionally, feel free to like this video if you liked it. Feel free to subscribe to my channel if you're interested. I post new art and book related content every single Tuesday and occasionally on Friday, and I would love to have you along for that process. Thank you guys again so much for your time. Again, I do really appreciate it, and I will look forward to catching you guys in the next one. Thank you so much. Bye.